Nick Chiarkas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Pat.
So,
Pat or Patrick, what do you like?
either one is fine. I don't care.
Right? Okay, my friend.
I've been called a lot worse than Pat or Patrick. And when the nuns were mad at me in school, it was certainly Patrick or Mr. O'Donnell. It's like, okay, I'm in trouble.
Well, we
Something's
have a
going
lot
on.
in common. I was a sociology major. I was a criminal justice, took a undergraduate in criminal justice, and I was an altar boy. So I understand everything you say.
Well, I'm a good fallen Irish Catholic boy. Mom and dad are from Ireland. So if
Wow.
you weren't Catholic and you were from like the Republic, you were a Martian. There was no
Yeah.
such thing as anything else. It was like
Wow.
90 something percent, Catholics. So,
Well, I grew up, my mother's Italian. I grew up mostly in an Italian neighborhood, and my father's Greek. So
well,
we were in church every Sunday.
well, if between the Italian and the Greek, you ate a lot better than me
Oh
with
yeah,
the
we
Irish.
ate good. We
Yeah,
ate good.
we didn't. Mom boiled everything to death and there was no flavor. That was kind of like that's Irish cooking. It's
I
not to
got you.
be celebrated, that's for sure. But we have some things in common in going through your stuff. One of the most obvious things, obviously we were both cops. And were your parents immigrants or
My father was first generation born in this country.
okay.
My mother was second or third. I think she was
Gotcha.
second generation born in this country.
And you were born in New York City, right?
Yeah,
That's your
yeah,
roots. Yeah.
yeah.
You know, so I'm first generation, and we were both cops, both come from larger cities. I was born in Chicago, and we both had teachers tell our parents that we wouldn't amount to a whole lot.
That's true.
My it got to the point where when I graduated from eighth grade, my grandpa gave me a pair of brass knuckles. I'll never forget it. And he's like, "You're gonna need these, kid. You're probably gonna wind up going to prison. You need to protect yourself." And I'm like, "Okay." So, what it was is, we didn't know what ADD or dyslexia or any of that kind of stuff was back then. And I'll never forget the teacher telling my mom at a parent teacher conference because the dads didn't go to those things. That's just the way it was. And said, "Oh, Patrick's a play baby. He cannot, he can't stay on track. He's stupid. He's dumb."
Oh,
And it's like, okay. Now this was a civilian teacher. It wasn't a nun. Actually, the nuns that were my teachers were some of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. They were amazing. I mean, I
yeah.
know there's the stereotype of, the
Oh,
penguin from the Blues Brothers and all that.
yeah.
And I'm
No, I
sure
get
they're out there, but what was your experience?
my experience with the principal telling my mother that I was stupid.
Yep.
Um, I was sitting outside the principal's office. It was after school, and I could hear that the principal's, it was PS1, the principal's secretary left for the day. And my mother, she's, I guess the Italian leftover immigrant feeling thought of principals as gods.
Oh,
So whatever
absolutely. You didn't
said has
question
to
them.
be
Yeah.
true. No. So he was telling my mother that your son is stupid. That's the word he used. That's why I reacted when you said that.
Yep.
And that he'll never graduate from high school. So you need to steer him toward a secure vocation. A lot of people don't know this part. So a teacher that I had earlier, so this is just, I'm a fourth grader. So a teacher I had in the second or third grade was walking past the office. She had a bag of groceries. She left some stuff in her office. It was fortuitous. And she was going to her office to pick up the stuff, and she saw me sitting there, and she could hear what the
Yeah.
principal was saying. And she took me to the teacher's lounge, told me to come with her, Mrs. Well, I shouldn't say, yeah, I'll say her name, Mrs. Singer. Took me to the teacher's lounge, and she made a pot of tea. I never had like a cup of tea.
Right.
And she gave me a cup of tea. She had a cup of tea, and she took a pound cake out of the bag. And it was, I think it was just a plain pound cake, vanilla pound cake with a vanilla frosting. And she asked me if I like cake. And I said, well, especially the frosting. And
Oh
she
yeah.
cut the cake this way, horizontally. So there was this much frosting and this much cake. And she shared it between us. And she told me she believed in me. She
Oh,
liked having me in class. She gave me a book of poetry that I still have, Untermeyer's collection of poems or something, and told me to read it. And I said, I can't read poetry. And she said, yeah, you can. Read the poems, and read everything you can get your hands on. And then she told me to always eat the icing off the cake. When, I don't know how much of an impression that made that moment, that day. It made a big impression because he was a grown up talking to me.
right.
This kid, I was what, 8 years old, maybe 9 years old, like I mattered. She was asking me questions about myself. We were just talking. Um, when I Later in life, I got my doctorate in sociology, and I sent it to her. Well, I tracked it down. I sent her a copy of it with a note that said, "Look what you did."
Uh,
And I think there's a lot of teachers and writers that don't realize the power of their voice, the power of their words, the time they take to speak to a child, speak with the child, not tell them what to do, but to talk to them,
right.
can make all the difference. You can make a kid fly, with your words. And so I don't know what would have become of me. See, so I had it. My first job was, oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going on and on,
Oh,
aren't I?
that's okay. No,
My
so
first real,
go ahead.
my first real job when I was 11 was in a grocery store. And I would deliver groceries. So, it was like DoorDash back in the day. Uh,
Were you on a bicycle or just doing it
no,
on foot?
no, carry this box of groceries.
Okay.
Um, and on the way back, well, gangs would follow me because they knew on my way back I'd have cash
Oh,
from
sure.
wherever
Yeah.
I delivered it. And I learned to outrun them on rooftops. I would jump from roof to roof,
Oh my
and
God, that's like something out of a movie. Who are you, James Bond or something? I
they
mean,
would,
that's
no, I was just scared and I wanted to get away, and I would make these jumps, and I liked it. I liked jumping.
does your mom know that? Did your mom know that you're jumping off of roofs?
No, from roof to roof, not
Yeah,
off.
okay. Did,
Um, and and I would find my way to the New York Public Library, and I would go in through the top and go into the fiction section, look out the window, I'd see them waiting around, and I would read until they left. And when they left, I'd go downstairs, and the grocery was not far from them, the grocery store, and I would live with the money. But maybe her words back then is why I would go into the fiction section and read. But she saved me. That teacher saved me.
wow.
I'll
Now,
tell you this, I learned an important rule when you're jumping from roof to roof, never ever jump to a higher roof than the roof you're jumping from. Even if it's just an inch higher, you always want a lower roof.
okay. And I don't plan on jumping from any roof to roof right now. I'm too old, but I guess in your youth you could do things like that.
Yeah, you think you're invincible. But
Absolutely.
that teacher saved me, I think.
So for time frame, this is New York City in
1950s,
in the 60s or 50s?
50s.
In the 50s. Okay. Now, where were you living? Was this like in the city proper? Like which borough? Where were you?
Sure. On the Lower East Side of Manhattan, in the Two Bridges neighborhood, and they refer to it as that because it is a neighborhood between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge.
Okay.
And it is up against the East River and the docks, if you recall, on the waterfront.
Okay. So this is a
Basically,
heavy
filmed.
populated urban environment.
Oh yeah. And at first we lived in a tenement which was only 2 rooms, and it had the toilet in the hallway.
Oh, you had to
And
share a
shared it
bathroom with
with other
everybody. Oh,
people in the building. And then we moved into the housing projects, which I mean were dangerous and scary and all, but you had a bathroom inside the apartment, and I mean it was wonderful.
How big
Well,
of
it
a
was
family do you come from? How many siblings?
a brother and a sister. My
Okay,
mother,
so
father, and a brother and a sister.
okay, so five people in a two bedroom. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it just but that's New York. They
Yeah.
seem to squeeze a lot of people into small spaces. That's
I
just the way
think
it
there
is.
were in the projects I grew up in, just in the projects, I think there were 10,000 people living in the
Wow.
project.
So this
And
is in the late 50s, I'm assuming?
this is in from 1950 to 1961 or 2. We lived in
Okay.
the projects. I joined the Army in 62.
Okay.
And my parents moved to Co-op, which was across the street, just as I was leaving home.
Yeah.
Um,
What did your parents do for a living?
my Well, we get for a while. My father was a longshoreman,
Oh,
and
okay.
my mother was getting federal subsidies, and then she got a job at the Journal American newspaper, and my father became a New York City cop, as
Ah,
did my two uncles, as my other uncle became a New York City firefighter. Um, and so I came from basically, this was like 1950, basically a cop family.
okay.
They,
That
they were all
explains
cops.
some of this. Yes.
Yeah.
So, how young were you when your dad became a police officer
It was
in New York?
1950. I was born in 43, so I was 7.
Okay, that's a big impression. You see
Oh,
dad
yeah.
wearing a uniform, he's yeah, the gun belt, the
Yep.
badge, well, the shield or the New
Yep.
York verbiage for that.
Yep. That's
Uh,
right.
but yeah, that's very impressionable. Now, I just want to backtrack just for a second. You said there was like gangs chasing you. Who were the gangs back then? Were they just like block by block, kind of semi-organized? When I think of gangs, I think of Bloods and Crips, and in Milwaukee, it's Gangster Disciples, Latin Kings, that kind of stuff.
It was different. The gangs were mostly neighborhoods or street gangs.
Okay.
And there was a gang in the projects that eventually became the toughest gang in the projects. But everybody kind of, I belonged to a gang. I belonged to the Cherry Street Boys. But I was also an Eagle Scout, belonged to the
Okay.
Boy Scouts. A lot of the gang members did. You wound up joining gangs for protection
Mm,
if you were just by yourself. Um, so it was really, if you think of it as very low income, um, everybody is kind of in New York City in that neighborhood. There was Chinatown, there was the Jewish area, the Irish area,
oh
the
yeah,
Italian
absolutely.
area. And it wasn't a melting pot. It was like a fruit salad, you know, which I guess in some ways is good, different cultures and stuff like
Right.
that. But there were times when, the white gangs would have a fight with the Puerto Ricans and the black gang, and then
Mm,
another time the Puerto Ricans and the white gang would fight the black gang, and another time, I mean, there wasn't anger. We weren't selling drugs. We were just kids on the block. We had Cherry Street Parks, the Cherry Street Boys, and that was our territory, and we would fight to defend it.
okay.
Uh, I mean, it was mostly just kids, the
Okay.
culture of the gangs. Although, boy, in that neighborhood at that time, it was the height. This is 1957, the height of gang violence in the country. And in fact, 1957, I believe, is when West Side Story came out.
That's the first thing that popped in the Jets and the Sharks are going to be going at it.
And it was more like that without dancing,
Yeah.
without
There's no
dancing.
choreographed dancing.
No, it was you didn't know why you didn't like the other kids, but
Right.
sometimes you
Now,
got to win.
was that more of an ass whooping kind of thing where you're fighting with fists
Yeah.
and
Okay.
nobody's shooting anybody? It's
No. Sometimes there would be a knife.
or a
Sometimes you would use
baseball
your
bat or
belt.
something or a pipe.
Yeah, you'd be swinging your belt, but
Yeah.
uh, boy, nobody would shoot. It was almost considered cowardly. to
It
shoot
is
some,
cowardly.
you know?
You can't face somebody. If you got a beef with somebody and you can't face them, I mean, any coward can grab a gun and shoot you from like 20 yards away.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it,
exactly.
it's a lot different when you're toe to toe with somebody and it's like, all right, here we go.
Right.
That's a totally different animal altogether.
Yeah.
So
And the culture, when I talk about the culture, oh, you're a sociologist, you'll appreciate this. So um, poverty meant that, I remember coming back from church. We went to church, I was all alone, and this kid, Bobby Balls, was going to pick a fight with me. And I said, I can't fight you right now. I have my Sunday clothes on, but I'll go home and change and I'll meet you in the park. He said,
sure.
okay. And I mean, nobody wanted to. I mean, that's my only Sunday clothes, man.
Sure.
I can't get these dirty.
Absolutely.
Um, and so that there was some of that.
Okay.
I don't think it's respect, but there was an understanding,
Yeah,
a
I think there
cultural
was like a code almost
that
back
might
in
be a better word. Yeah.
yeah, back then. It was the way it was. But so you're New York City kind of middle lower class, is that fair to say?
Oh, lower class,
Lower
clearly. I
class?
mean,
Okay.
my mother getting federal subsidy, living
Okay,
in a
so
house.
lower class neighborhoods,
Yep.
and of course they breed their own issues, that's for sure.
Yep.
And it's New York, it's post World War II. Yeah, what, World War II ended in 45. Then, we had
Korea.
Korea,
Yep.
and then Vietnam was brewing. There
Yep.
when you turned 18, there was a draft going on, wasn't there?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so you joined the army preemptively. You
I
just
did. I
okay.
joined.
Wow. So you joined the army. Were you a ranger?
I went to ranger school, but I wasn't a ranger, right?
You
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 could
got
be
the
a
ranger tab.
yeah. But
Okay,
if you're a ranger, if you say I'm a ranger, that meant you were in the ranger battalion.
right, ranger
But
bat.
you
Yeah.
went through the training. I was in an airborne unit, 101st Airborne Division.
So you jumped out of airplanes.
I jumped out, as my wife says, yeah, I fall out of perfectly good airplanes.
Well, it kind of makes sense to me because you're jumping from one perfectly fine roof to another one. So why not, segue to I'm just gonna jump out of some airplanes.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd be afraid of heights. I wasn't. I actually, you know what happened to me, Pat? Um, I didn't feel very competent about myself and my life and growing up there. And I knew we were all us kids were heading, the best we can hope for was maybe a city job or working on the docks, good
Right.
overtime, or go to jail, um, or die. Uh, but I didn't feel competent in about myself or what I can do. And I know they got me. I saw this poster to join the army, and it was a paratrooper coming down at night.
Okay.
He had all this stuff tied to him. He was all alone, but all these big bags hanging. And I just stared at that. And I wanted to be him. I wanted to be so confident in myself that I could jump out of a plane at night and still know how to do the next thing.
Now,
And
what
they
year did
got
you
me
graduate from high school?
1960.
Okay, so you graduated from high school in 60. Did you, what, was there a big gap between joining the army and graduating?
62. So I had various jobs, silly jobs, learners, basement, packing clothes, warehouses,
Okay.
running the streets, stole a car at one point. Um, I knew I was going to get in trouble,
Right.
and I didn't know what else I was going to do. And I saw this poster, and that was it for me.
What did your poor mom say? It's like, hey, I'm joining the army.
I didn't say that. I didn't want to tell them until it was like a week before I was going to go. And so I
Wow.
joined, it must have been in May or June, and I went in August. And so I
Damn.
spent the whole summer not telling them. And then a
Damn.
week before I was going, my father was a Navy veteran
Okay.
in World War II. And I said, I joined the Army. I leave this weekend. My father just shook his head. My mother cried. Um, and I joined the Army.
Well, it's not as bad as one of my roommates, Paul, if you're listening to this. He was a good buddy of mine through high school, and he was my roommate in college, one of my roommates in college. He left a note for his mom on the kitchen
Oh, geez.
table and then went off to basic.
Oh, geez.
Oh, was she pissed at him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she was on fire. Yeah, it's like, really? He
Yeah, you
didn't
can't
give
do
them
that.
any inclination that he was joining the army.
Oh, my goodness.
So, but he made a career out of it, actually. So, hey, why not?
Worked
It
out.
treated him well. Treated him
Wow.
well. So New York, uh, the country, obviously, the 60s was quite tumultuous. You had civil rights demonstrations, a lot of anti-war stuff going on with the Vietnam War.
A lot of
Um,
riots.
yeah, a lot of riots. And that was, across the country. In Milwaukee, I was lucky enough when I was brand new as a copper to work with some of the cops that were the old timers, quote unquote, that did work during the riots. And they said it got so bad, they told us to go home and get our deer rifles. And they rode four deep in a squad car to get through some neighborhoods. It was, yeah, it was just Crazyville, USA. It was a totally different time in our history. And just listening to their stories, I'm just like, holy cow. And I'm sure New York was exactly the same.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all going on. Now, when did you get out of the army?
Got out in 65. And I took the police test because my father was a cop, my uncles were cops. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just had a high school education, didn't know what I was going to do when I got out. So they joined the cops with us. And so I took the test, passed, and got out, sold jewelry for Mario Bucciolati's on Fifth Avenue until they called me in December. So I got out in the summer of 65 and went into the academy in December of 65.
Wow. What did your mom say about that? It's like she's going to be worried sick about you,
Oh yeah, she didn't want me to do that. My father said, it's a tough job. Keep your head down. Don't try to be a hero. But I've got two uncles. My mother's brothers were
Well,
cops.
it's not an unusual career progression to transition from military to police,
Oh, not at all. I
especially
mean,
back then.
yeah, if you talk about my lack of self-confidence, I mean, I knew how to wear a uniform and march and do what I'm
Right.
told.
Yeah, exactly. There was a
Didn't do
lot
that.
of, and I joined up in 95, and a good chunk of my class were former military or
Sure.
reservists.
Yeah.
So it was just, they knew how to do all the about face, left face, right face, the
Yep. Yep.
marching and all that good stuff. And, you'd learn from those guys. And yeah, it was just a normal thing. Then when I got to a district station, you know, you, I had the honor, and I say honor, of working with some Vietnam vets that were on day shift. They're, they had to wait around till they were deep into their 60s to get a decent pension. I felt
That's
so
right.
bad for him. It's like it was okay, but not great.
Yep.
Things didn't get better till later, as far as a fair wage and a fair pension for what you did. And these poor guys, it's like they didn't want to be there.
No.
It was the white styrofoam cup filled with black coffee and the cigarette.
Right.
That's
That's
all
right.
those guys.
That's right.
But I,
That's
I
right.
loved them. I loved talking to them. I mean, they were, yeah, it was awesome. I absolutely love
When,
those guys.
when we
But
got out, you were telling me a little bit about your son, who I admire. Um, but when we got out, um, again, this is back in the 60s, 65. There's a whole bunch of us. We were told, so, you might be suffering from shell shock, which is what they
yeah,
called it,
shell shock. Yeah.
or something else. You might not be feeling well. Your discharge is right now, but if you feel like you need to see somebody, um, you will have to postpone when you get out, and it will be on a permanent record.
Oh.
And we all said, no, thanks.
Yeah,
No,
nope.
thanks.
I don't
We're
want any part of
fine.
that.
We're fine. Bye. Um,
I'm surprised they went even that far because it was more or less ignored.
it
And
was,
yeah, I mean, it's like nothing to see here, that kind of thing.
but they
So
had to get you to sign it.
I
Nope.
can see that.
Fine. You're
Yeah.
good. Yep. All
So
right.
you go to the NYPD. Now, your class, about how big was your class that you went through? Do you remember?
I don't. But New York City at that time had almost 30,000 cops, 38, 28,000.
Okay.
Yeah, 28,000. I think now it's got to be up to 40,000.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it still is the largest police department in the world.
it was a huge class.
Okay.
And there weren't many veterans right then, but we
Hmm.
got more and more and more
As time went
as
on.
the years went by. Yeah.
Makes sense. For that time period, that makes total sense. Now, when you graduated, what kind of equipment? You sent me a picture and I had to giggle because I see you in your uniform and you got your gun belt. Obviously it's going to be a wheel gun, it's going to be a revolver,
Yeah.
and your bullets are on your belt like you're from the Wild West or something. I
Yep.
had to laugh out loud at
Yeah,
that.
that's how it looked. And there were guys, I thought they were like cowboys at first that would tie their holster to their leg. And I would shake my head. And then the first time I chased a suspect and my gun belt started bouncing all
Yeah.
around, I said, now I know why they do that. It's not for a quick draw, it's to hold your gun belt down when you're running. But
Oh, that's
I never
before
did that.
keepers, huh? You didn't have the keepers on your belt.
Right. Yeah, that was before that. That was before we didn't have any kind of communication device. There was call boxes every so often,
Sure.
most of which
Did
somebody had ripped the phone out
I was
of.
just gonna say don't work all that great. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. But I mean, it was just, your shirt, what I was wearing, your shirt, your gun belt, your nightstick, blackjack, and your ability to talk your way out of some kind of situation.
So
I
what gun
mean,
did you have back then? What it was a 38, I would imagine.
it was a 38 Smith& and Wesson. It was either a, no, it had to be a 4-inch or 6-inch,
Okay.
was the regular gun.
Yeah.
My off duty was a 2-inch barrel, and it was a Colt Detective Special because it had 6 shots instead of five.
Now, did you have to buy your own bullets and own guns, or did New York supply that?
No, they supplied it, and they gave you a uniform allowance
Okay.
and a paycheck once a year. Um, But actually, the gun I still have is the Colt. That wasn't my off-duty gun. Wow, you're bringing back all these memories.
Yeah.
Um, I left the police department in 72 and was teaching criminal justice, and that's not important, in Trenton State College. And I was living in New Jersey, and the state police came to my apartment. It was just me and my two kids.
Yeah.
Um, And they said that some guy I arrested just busted out of jail in New York, and he's told people he's coming to kill you.
Oh, geez.
And I said, he's on a long list of people. I mean, as I tell many people, I think I'm likable, but I am certain there are more people that hate me in the world than like me in the world. But they asked me, we know you were a copper. Do you want a gun or do you want, we can put a car outside? I said, no, give me a gun. I didn't have my off duty. And they
Yeah.
gave me the Detective Special Colt 6-shot.
Oh, wow, that's cool. You know, it-
And I
that's
remember I sent my kids to my parents,
yeah, and back. So you were a copper from what year to what year?
65 to 72.
Okay. Now, as far as equipment, you had your gun belt, six extra rounds, or did they give you 12?
Um, they gave us a box. What would be in a box?
Oh. No, like that would fit on your belt.
Oh, that would fit on my belt. We had that belt that you saw. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you could probably put 12 easily in that.
Okay, yeah. So you've got that, like you said, a billy club and a blackjack or a sap.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
did the uniform pants have a pocket for the sap?
On the belt. Everything was on the belt.
Oh,
This
everything
was
was on the belt.
on
Okay.
heavy A's. The
That's,
handcuffs were on the
but
belt.
there were,
Yeah.
yeah, and handcuffs, obviously. But there was no bulletproof vest back then. Nobody wore them back then.
No, I have a bulletproof vest that I kept, which is I can hold it up and show it to you, which is just this heavy white
Oh,
looking it's bib. I mean, it's just
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah.
When I first
Um,
joined in 95, I remember my first vest and I wore mine religiously. And they were all under the shirt. I think that's a lot more professional looking, but
yep,
I could,
that's exactly right.
but I do see the value of, I remember when they okayed the outer carriers, when it was 90 or 100 degrees out, that I see it, but I was just an old timer and I'm just like, no, I've gone 20 years, with it under my shirt. I'm not going to change now. And,
I agree
and
with you.
and it's more effective and I think it looks better because
And it presents a different image.
it does. It does. And I was a boss for 18 years. I was a sergeant and would drive me nuts because these guys weren't washing their vest carriers. If you have an outer vest carrier, it's getting dingy
Yeah,
or, we had dark blue uniforms. Well, they'd get bleached from the sun.
yeah.
So now all of a sudden they've got a powder blue, vest carrier and it looked goofy. And I'm just like, no, but hey, it wasn't up to me, just whatever. But
I understand.
but vests got better through the years. You could actually move and breathe in them. I mean, they're not there for comfort, obviously, but they have saved a lot of lives.
Oh, I have no doubt. I have
Yes.
no doubt.
So, what was your career progression in New York? Did you start out walking a beat, or what did that
Walk,
look like?
walk the beat. Uh, my very first assignment. So after you get out of the academy in New York, I'm assuming it's the same, but it might not be. But back then, when you got out of the academy, it was 2 months, 2.5 months in the academy. You got out, and you're assigned for a year, you're on probation.
Yep.
And so they assign you to the worst possible places because if you're going to screw up, they want you to screw up during that first year while
Which
you're
is,
on.
I think, is great because I wound up working in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city, if not the country, and I found myself to be very lucky to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, as a new cop, you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. How much are you going to learn? I mean,
Oh,
it's amazing.
oh, I can remember I was in the South Bronx, terrible area. It was the 41st precinct. The nickname of it was Fort Apache
Fort
because
Apache, the Bronx. Yeah, they made a movie about it.
that's right. And so the sergeant on the desk sent us out and said there's three new guys, me and two other guys. You each have a foot post. You're alone. And there's call boxes. Make sure you call in on your regular hour. And if you have any problems at all or need help, just give me a call. So it's great. So
Because it's that simple. It's like, hey,
yeah,
bad guys, stop what you're doing right now. I got to make a phone
yeah,
call,
that's awesome. I came across a robbery. Um, a guy in a bodega holding it up, and I could see it from the outside. And there's a call box nearby, and I called the sergeant and I said, "Hey, sergeant, there's a guy holding up a bodega across the street." And he said, "Geez, let's see, what can we do? Maybe we should get a cop over there, huh?" All right, you got me. Okay, I got it. I got it. Thank you. So try not to get hurt. Don't let anybody else get hurt, and bring the guy in. Okay. And so that's what I did.
Oh
But
my God, that's
this
hilarious.
is naive young man.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe we should call a cop.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. I got you, son.
So you foiled a bodega
Well
robbery.
done.
Way to go.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Now, what else did you do with the NYPD?
My, when my grandkids ask me to tell them a police story. I mean, they want to hear the stories about, shots fired through our car window. I mean, all this crazy stuff that was happening, knife fight, all of this when I was a cop. But the story that touches me the most was I was still on foot patrol and um, I stopped the rape of a 12-year-old girl
Oh my God.
Gloria. Her name is Gloria. I won't say her last name.
Yeah.
Um, and this guy, he looked crazy. He in his 20s, tore her clothes. She had a little grocery bag, all that stuff. Anyway, I came upon him and grabbed him, calmed her down, relaxed. I got some woman that came by to just stay with her. It was at night. She was out shopping. Um, and I arrested him and I asked the woman, please stay with Gloria. And she
Yeah.
did. And I brought the guy into the precinct and signed him in. He's going to go into a holding cell. And at that point, I don't know what it was like for you, but you tried to make a good arrest and you get a badge and people know that. But what happens as a young cop is the detectives take the arrest,
Oh, absolutely.
and you become the witness. So anyway,
Yep.
I didn't much care about that. But I went back and I talked to Gloria and I took it to this Greek diner that I knew, which I was not supposed to do. Got her a milkshake. Gus, I knew him well.
Yeah.
And I had a cup of coffee. I talked to her for a long time. Gave her my phone number if she needs to talk. Told her nothing was her fault. Got her a little shirt. And then we went to a bodega and I bought the rest of the food that she had purchased
Yeah.
and then took her into the precinct because the detectives wanted to talk to her. And they were
Sure.
pissed at me because you're not supposed I'm interfering with their investigation. I'm not talking to you. But anyway, Gloria called me several times and we talked on the phone. And I spent time talking to her. And eventually, we would write to each other every now and then, see how she's doing.
Okay.
We exchanged Christmas cards. She eventually got married to a New York City cop.
Oh, wow.
They named their son Nicholas after me.
Aw. How cool is
And
that?
I can't tell you how much, when you see all these cop shows or cops are criticized and all of that, sometimes we forget that there's those moments too, where you've saved somebody, and you supported and you helped somebody. So, Gloria is usually the story I tell my grandchildren who now say, we don't want to hear about Gloria, uh, which is what they call me. Tell us a scary story. Tell us
Yeah.
a scary. But Gloria I think, is emblematic of what I believe police officers really do day after day after day. They're helping somebody. It's not sexy, it's not in the news, it's
Right.
not celebrated, but day after day after and there's bad cops that do bad shit, like just like anybody else, but
Right.
mostly you're helping somebody. You're getting somebody out of a jam. You're doing something kind.
Well,
Um,
they're
it's
calling
easy to
you
forget that.
they're calling you on the worst day of their life. Or your interaction with them is usually, they're not going to call the cops when, hey man, everything's going great. I got money in the bank, my kids are healthy,
Good point.
my job is going great. It's like,
Yeah.
everything is super awesome. They're not calling the coppers. It's when it's meltdown time. Something
Yeah.
is really bad. But what you said really strikes a chord with me as far as what I saw for 25 years was a bunch of men and women who wanted to do the right thing. And it sounds corny, but they wanted to help people.
Yeah.
They had a heart for service.
Yep.
That's what it all boils down to. It's like you are a public servant. And if you don't want to be a public servant, don't be a cop. That's your
Yep.
number one job is to help people. And what people don't realize too, I mean, like you said, it's not sexy. It's not going to be on the 10 o'clock news. It's not going to be on the internet where Officer Nick, did what he just did. Nobody's going to care except the person who you helped and, their family and friends, obviously. But cops save a lot more lives than they ever take. A
Yep.
lot more, and in so many
Absolutely.
different ways.
That's well put. That's well put. I mean, I think, it wasn't just my father and my uncles. It was that we all kind of didn't like the bully.
Right, exactly. Yes, you want to
We
stand up
were
for the
gonna-
little guy.
yeah, we want to stand between Gloria and the bully.
Yes.
That's what I want to do.
So yeah, I was
Um,
going to ask you what your fondest memories of being a cop in New York, but
oh,
that sounds like a pretty fond memory.
that is a fond memory. That
Yeah.
is a fond memory.
What do you miss most about being a copper?
Boy, I miss my partner, Tom Kenny, who died about 4 years ago. Um, Taught me more. I mean, I have a doctorate in sociology and a law degree. He taught me more about the law in action than any degree, any schooling, anything. He was the old guy in the car. He was 27. I was 24, you know.
Okay.
Um, but I progressed from a walking post, and what you wanted in New York, we called it a seat. And if you got a seat, that meant you're now in a car.
Okay.
But and so Tom Kenny had an open seat. His partner retired. He was the young guy at that point, and he was kind of like interviewing people. They would assign a different guy to him each time. And I kind of knew him from the just going out on patrol and seeing him.
Sure.
So we go, I'm assigned to his car, and this is a true story. And he takes me down this, and we talk for a while. We get along. We have a lot in common. He's a former Marine, and we're just talking about neighborhoods. He's from Brooklyn, and so we like each other
Yeah.
generally. So he stops in front of this clothing store, a lot of double parked cars, and he says, "Go in there, ask for Mr. Schultz, and say Merry Christmas." This is like November 1st, November 2nd. Seems
Okay.
strange.
Yeah.
I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, do it." And so, I'm the new kid. I get out, I go into the shop, and I say, "Is Mr. Schultz here?" And they say, "What do you want, officer?" And I said, "I just want to wish him a Merry Christmas." And they said, "Okay, hold on a minute." And guy comes out and gives me an envelope. I go back, I get in the car. I said, "They gave me this envelope." And he said, "What's in it?" And there's all this cash in it.
Oh boy.
And he says, what do you think? There's a lot of money there. And I said, Tom, and this is true, not for nothing, is what I said. You can have it all. And I'm not telling anybody, but I really don't want any of it.
That's not my thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, good, you can ride with me. Go give them back the money.
Oh, is that cool?
I went back in there, closed the envelope. I said, here. And they said, no, 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 please. I said, I'm not going to ticket your cars. We just don't want it. And we left. I became Tom Kenny's partner after that.
You just
And
you just had an integrity test.
yeah,
That's
and
what
not only that, he
internal
said,
affairs would pull those on coppers. They'd put money in the back seat of the squads, and they'd
oh, I
see
didn't
who
know
would
that.
inventory it or who would take it.
Uh, yeah, but this was, Nick, I don't care about this. I'm not turning anybody else in. I just want to know, what you want and what you expect, and you want to ride with me. That's just my deal. And we're not going to
That's
change anything. We're not going
yeah.
to change the world. We're just not going to do it.
Wow.
Made me feel it reduced the importance of the job for me
Okay.
that moment. And if I took it, I think I would feel like I sold a piece of me.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, I'll never understand that with coppers, and nothing pisses off decent cops than dirty cops. Nothing makes you more angry because
Mhm.
it to earn that trust back from the public is you're
Yep.
going up a mountain, pushing a boulder. That ain't easy.
No.
And I remember we had a copper that was taking money from old ladies, or if they would go to a on day shift, dead bodies would pop up every now and then.
Oh yeah.
Just people dying of natural causes, like old people living by themselves or whatever. And this guy was like the Grinch, and I didn't know about this. I was his boss, and I always thought there was something kind of hokey about him. I didn't like him. He just rubbed me wrong.
Yep.
And I'm like, all right. Well, internal affairs did a sting because one of my cops went around everybody at the district, went straight to internal affairs and said, this guy's stealing. He's like the Grinch. He's got like a pillowcase before any bosses get there, etc. He'll go and take the jewelry, he'll take the money, etc. And so, he got fired and he got criminally charged, thank goodness. But really, you're gonna put your pension on the line for, $100,
Yeah.
$200. It's
Yeah.
it's so ridiculous. But oh God, those stories just drive me crazy because it's like
Yeah.
look at what you're gambling with. It is so stupid, and you have to look at yourself in the mirror every day.
That's right. That's your soul. That's
Yeah,
your,
it is.
why'd you join? Why'd you want to do this?
Why would you
Yeah.
sell your soul? Because that's what you're doing. So
Yeah.
Why
And I
would
know, I mean, I've heard excuses from cops that, I accept. Like my senators and my congressmen, they're taking more money than they just call it a contribution. And I get it. I think they're dirty too.
Yep, all day long.
That's my view of politics and stuff. They're all
Yeah.
dirty, they're all
Yep.
taking something. That doesn't mean it's okay for for me to do it. You want to do it, and I know I'm supposed to have a responsibility to turn you in. I'm not going to turn you in. That's up to you and your own feelings and what you believe in. I'm not going to be part of it. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
and you
it-
know what? You will get discovered somehow, some way. I'm a firm believer in that. And
yeah,
if there is an afterlife, you're gonna pay the piper.
yep.
That's the Irish Catholic in me. It's like, you will
All
be
right.
judged. It's
Yep.
maybe not in this life, but in another one. You're gonna have to stand tall before the man.
It's those moments, aren't they?
Yeah,
It's those moments, when like my son asked me, what's it really like? I mean, what's it really like to be a cop? What was it really like? And I said, so you're walking down a dark street in my day. There's no call box next to you. You see that it's a closed clothing shop, Barney's, and the window's broken, and it says guarded by dogs. Do you walk past it? If you walk past it, you shouldn't be a cop.
right, absolutely. And it's not for everybody.
No.
That's why, oh boy, we could go on a tangent here, but I'm not a believer in the draft the way, what you went through, because not everybody is cut out to be in the military. It's just not a good fit for some people. Some people, it's like peanut butter and jelly. I think, it does a wonderful thing for, the youth of today. And I think a lot of people could use it. I'm a huge believer in public service. Whereas, like, I interviewed a guy from Israel, and he said, when you're in high school, you had to do X amount of hours of extracurricular. Now, that's not like being in band or, like chess club. It's
Yep.
working at a food pantry. It's working with the cops, working with the firefighters, et cetera. And then when you graduate, you had to do, I think the men had to do 2 or 3 years and the women had to do 2 years of public service. Most of them went into the military, but he said you didn't have to. It could be police, it could be digging ditches, it could be infrastructure. And boy, I think that would really, really do a world of good.
Wow. I was almost going to disagree with you because I've been a long time proponent of uh, right after high school, everybody should be drafted. But I agree with you that it doesn't have to be the military. You need to
Right.
do 3 years in public service and then get a free college education
Yeah.
after that.
You know what? You paid your dues.
Everybody across the board, nobody gets out of it. Nobody, and if you're in a wheelchair, you still do your 3 years of
Yep.
public service, whatever that might be,
You could
and
be
you
answering phones somewhere.
um,
You could,
yeah,
whatever.
it absolutely. I
Uh,
think that would be that you would devote yourself and your time for your country, for your state, for your city, for others.
yeah.
I think is crucial for
And I think it
everybody
would
getting
teach you
out of
some
high
good
school.
humility as well.
Yeah, it would.
And it would just, you would learn skills that you never thought you would learn. It just, oh yeah. And for some people, you know what? Hey, military, like I said before, it did my son a world of good.
Yeah.
He was very aimless until he joined the military, and he came out, he was super squared away, and he
Yeah.
was just super driven. And it's like, it was just so much fun to watch that transition, because it wouldn't have happened if you just kind of drifted around from one BS job to another and just kind of
Isn't that
flopped
right,
into
Patrick?
wherever.
I mean, that's exactly right.
It's just amazing. So you're a cop in New York City for how many years?
For
Seven?
65 to 7 years, 72.
7 years? Why did you leave? That's unusual for somebody to leave the job.
So I come home and um, from a 4 to midnight shift. So it
Okay.
had to be like, oh, maybe a quarter to one.
Hmm.
And I had my daughter at the time was 3 years old. My son was 2 months old, Erica and Nick. Erica's the one that's a high school English teacher in Menominee Falls.
Cool.
And there's a note for me from my wife that says, Eric is fine. Nick has to be fed at 2. Bye. And she was gone
Oh,
and stayed gone. She went back to Kentucky. She was from Paducah, Kentucky. She moved in with her boyfriend in Paducah, Kentucky. And at first, I got to tell you, at first I felt sorry for myself,
oh yeah.
and I had these two little kids. I wasn't sure what to do, and then Nikki started crying. He's a 2 month old,
Yeah.
and I got this insert and put it in a pot of hot water and put the formula bottles in it. Put it on the stove, started heating it up, testing it on my arm. Um, Fed Nikki, um, would drop Nick and Erica off at a babysitter next door who became Erica's godmother when I would go out on a shift, and decided I fell in love with these kids. Like if first I felt bad, I'm 24 years old. I want to date. I want to have fun
Oh
now.
yeah. Single dad at 24. Oh my God.
Yeah. But I fell in love with these two kids, and I decided I wanted a job where I would be able to take them to school in the morning.
Mm,
Not a job. I wanted to be able to take them to school in the morning and pick them up when school was over. But I loved being a cop. So we contacted the VA. Yep, the GI Bill sent me to college. I got a job, was offered a job. This was when criminal justice programs were brand new. I got my undergraduate at um, uh, in what was it? It was before it was John Jay College. It was the College of Police Science.
okay.
But they thought that was too cute because it said cops.
Oh
So they
yeah. I
changed
guess.
it to
Yeah.
the John Jay College. And the great thing was I can go at night or I can go during the day. The
Okay.
courses. And I was offered a job teaching criminal justice. They were just starting a program at Trenton State College in New Jersey that had federal funds, and they needed somebody that had a PhD and was a cop. And there was one person in the whole country, Arthur Niederhofer, and he wasn't going to leave John Jay. And I had a master's at that point, and they hired me. And I took my kids to school, picked them up after school. But if it wasn't for that, I would have stayed a cop forever. I just loved it. I loved
Yeah.
being out there. I loved being able to help people. Um,
It gets under your skin. It gets into you. It's it's hard to describe. It's once you're in it, it's hard to leave.
oh man, you said something, forget what show it was, that really touched me. And I think it was the first time I reached out to you. You said something about the back room, the feeling of being in the back room with the guys and the sergeant reading out, stolen cars in the area. Watch
Yep.
out for we need somebody to give notice to this family. Their kid was found dead, blah, 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 all this stuff. And you're with all these guys and playing cards. And I mean, just what a wonderful group of men and women all together, caring about each other and dedicating themselves to the community out there. And you leave together, and that feeling, I don't know if you can, not even in the military, I don't know if you can get that anyplace else
Yeah,
other
that
than
feeling of
in
camaraderie is something, and we'll talk about this later, but once you leave it and you're retired, that's one of the things, it's like, yeah, people get addicted to the job. They get addicted to the adrenaline. Especially if you're in like some high speed UC thing or whatever, it's easy to the job for the job to consume you and your family takes a back seat. Everything takes a back seat,
oh yeah,
you
oh
know,
yeah,
to the job. And, you're going 100 miles an hour and all of a sudden you pull the pin, now you hit a brick wall. Now
yeah,
what? That's
yeah.
and we could talk about that a little bit later, but boy, that's a difficult transition. You don't realize how awesome that is until you leave it.
Oh
When you're in the middle of it, you're like, well, this is normal, right? Doesn't every
yeah.
I'm sure accountants are going through this too, or whatever, whatever the job may be. And it's like, no, this is a very unique. I think the
Oh,
fire service is very similar as well.
I
Anything
agree.
public service like that, my kid will tell me stories of, from the firehouse and whatever. And I've had friends that were firefighters, and I'm like, oh yeah, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's very special. And it breaks my heart that so many young people don't want to be cops anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, man, you're missing out. But I understand, and I don't get political at all, but I do understand the reasoning, and it's just a shame. It's just
Oh,
a
it is
shame.
a shame. It is a
And
shame.
and the people who are suffering the worst are the ones who need the cops the most.
Yeah. I I can remember sitting in a car with Tom Kenny and watching all these guys, on a day shift going to work in their suits and saying to him, "Man, I don't ever want to be a suit. You
Yep.
know, I just don't want to. I don't know how anybody, I don't care how much money you're making. How could you not want to do this job instead of being a suit?" Um, yeah, I knew I would miss it. I loved it. And again, my father, my uncles that was still
Yeah.
cops when I left. But I had to be with my kid. I saw it as not really having a choice. I could either pick them or I could pick me.
Well, you took the high road, and good for
You
you
know,
for doing it. That's not everybody would have made that choice. Let's just say that.
well, and but that's the only reason I left.
Okay.
That was it. That
So
was
you move on to teaching, and you get your master's, eventually you get your doctorate, and I was looking at your bio and I see Deputy Chief Counsel to the US Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. What is that? I'm looking at it like I don't know what the hell he's talking about here. Deputy Chief Counsel for the President's Commission on Organized Crime. That all sounds incredibly high speed. Could you explain that to us a little bit?
sure that was high speed. That was a good job actually. Um, wow. So uh, there's a lot that I picked up when I was a cop. If we go
Sure.
back there just for a second, there was, oh, for example, Woodstock. So, um, what I was one of the few NYPD cops that was sent to Woodstock, the music festival in Bethel, New York, right? What I learned that we didn't have guns, we didn't have our badges. We wore these jackets. I can get mine out and show it to you, that said peace on it.
Okay.
Um, the cops in the local towns wore their uniform with their guns and everything else, and state police, but they were on the highways and the roads coming in. We expected 20,000 people, and we got um, over 250,000. I forget the total amount. We
Wow.
had Hell's Angels were there, the Black Panther Party, everybody. It was a possible disaster. And again, all we had was talking to people, you
Right.
know. Um, and I kind of learned more about doing that and just slowing down. We got back, Tom Kenny and I. Oh, and I did. You asked me once about meeting people. I'm on stage and helping people with different things. I have a short sleeve shirt on, and Jimi Hendrix points to me and says, "Hoptown,
Hoptown?
Hoptown." And I say, "What?" And he says, "Hoptown." And I said, "Hoptown?" And he said, "I could see the tattoo on your arm, the 101st Airborne
That's right. Yeah,
Division."
he
And
was a vet. Yeah, he was in the army.
And he was with the 101st Airborne Division, and
Oh,
he
okay.
knew that the only place to get those tattoos were in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and
Yeah.
we called it.
Well,
Um,
yeah, let's
well,
talk about Woodstock real quick because I'm a huge music buff. I'm
oh,
looking at the
oh,
lineup. The Who was there.
it was,
Janis Joplin. See, Creedence Clearwater Revival. Sha Na Na. I saw that. I was like, what are they doing there?
I know, I know.
Jefferson Airplane. I saw the Who in concert back in like '81. It was one of their farewell tours. You know,
Yeah,
and you saw it with Keith Moon. Keith Moon had just died, unfortunately.
I I knew the music. I would go before I joined the army. I would go to the Cafe Wa in Greenwich Village, where Hendrix would perform, Janis Joplin would perform. George Carlin would
Oh,
perform. I mean, it
cool.
was for free. You just walk in and sit down and buy drinks. And I mean, it just, and these were up and coming entertainers.
Sure.
Um, it, it so I knew. I knew the moment I was in. I wasn't thinking about, oh, this is going to be scary. This is a big crowd. What are we going to do? There's only like 200 of us,
Right.
and we're going to somehow, provide peace. I knew. And the guy that was in charge, the cop, who was a lieutenant or a captain in some police department, he hired all of us, named Wes Pomeroy. He read the crowd immediately and he made an announcement. And remember, this is 1969.
Okay.
People don't like cops.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He made an announcement. He said, the guys in red jackets are off duty New York City police officers. Everybody booed.
Yeah.
And they're here to maintain peace. And they booed again. And he said, there's only three rules. First rule, don't hurt anybody. Second rule, don't take something that doesn't belong to you. And the third rule is if somebody needs help, help them or call one of the guys in the red jacket.
Hmm.
And everybody cheered. And this, thought later, this was brilliant. There was no way you were going to control a
Right.
rowdy of this size. Bring them in on your side. You know,
No,
don't
that
take
makes
up
sense.
stuff.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think that some of the biggest problems that you probably encountered were heat stroke. That
Oh,
many
yeah.
people and probably not a whole lot of water
Not a lot of water.
and maybe some drug overdoses.
Or bad drugs. We would make
Right.
announcements. Don't use the drugs that are at X, Y, and whatever it might have been at the time. Stay away from those drugs. If you know anybody that's taken them, call us right away. We eventually had water brought in, um, but it was learning how. I know it's a long-winded way to get back to your question. Learning how to talk to people, talk with people, maybe is a
Sure.
better way to say. So we come back, and Tom Kenny and I are immediately put into a lineup of cops um, with a protest at New York University downtown, and all these coeds standing there and yelling at us and calling us pigs and stuff like that. And we're standing there holding back the crowd, and somebody's making a speech, and this young, cute little co-ed, what are they, 20 years old, maybe
Yeah, right.
21,
Yeah.
standing in front of me, called me a pig and spit on me. And I said, geez, you don't even know me. I'm
Right.
not a bad guy. I'm Nick. And, you know, my real goal here is just to protect everybody. I would never dream of doing something like that to you. Why would you spit on me? And she started apologizing and handkerchief and wiped it off. And Tom Kenny looked over at me and said, "We're not at Woodstock anymore,
Yeah.
are we?" No, but you see that? You see how it works? So instead of like arresting her and dragging her off, we did, what Pomeroy taught us to do. Just talk to them. Talk to
Well,
them.
when you're outnumbered that much, boy, you got to be super selective
Oh
about
yeah.
arresting people. That's something you don't see on TV. It's like, okay, sometimes you have to let things go,
Oh yeah.
and it goes against your grain. I get it, but the risk benefit you have to weigh. It's like,
Oh,
okay, say
absolutely.
what, you take her by her hair, knock her on the ground, hook her up. Now the entire crowd is agitated. Now what do you got? Now you got a
Yeah.
riot. It's like, really? I mean, yeah, some people are being assholes, whatever the case may be. It's like, all right, as long as they're not destroying anything or attacking anyone,
Yep.
okay. It's like,
Are they threatening to hurt somebody or to take somebody's life? Are they threatening to hurt me or take my life? If no to all of that, let's just deal with it.
right.
Let's deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to pick your battles. There's no doubt about it.
So I wound up teaching law at some point after I got my law degree, and I was offered a job. The U.S. Senate was looking for, they have a permanent subcommittee. The permanent subcommittee. It was the old McClellan subcommittee that investigated organized crime.
Mm,
If you saw Godfather 2,
okay.
or maybe even Godfather 1, where they're testifying before the Senate
Sure.
subcommittee. Yeah, so I was the deputy chief counsel for that subcommittee.
Okay.
I was on the Republican side of it. Um, why? I was my whole life. We don't have to talk about politics, but my whole life, I think I've been an independent because I just didn't know what a Republican or a Democrat was.
Sure.
But I knew that when I got out of the Army, it was Democrats and liberals that were calling me names and spitting at me. And when I was a
Right.
cop, Democrats and liberals were spitting at me. So, um, so I worked on the Republican side, and then there was an election, and the Democrats had the majority. And so the president at the time was Reagan, and he offered me a job being his deputy chief counsel in charge of organized crime. And
Wow.
so,
Did you get to meet him?
oh, yeah, the first time I met him, well, after the job interview, but
Yeah.
the first time I really met him, just me and him, I'm walking down a hallway at the White House, and he's walking toward me. And I'm this young kid,
Right.
and I'm nervous and
Oh,
And
yeah.
he comes walking right up to me and he says, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Nick Chiarkas." He holds out his hand. I'm your, and I stammer a little, uh, Deputy Chief Counsel for Organized Crime. It's nice to meet you. You nervous?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "Because I'm the president or because you really like my movies?" And I said, "Because I really like your movies." And he said, "Good. Okay." And that was it.
You
We
know, no
went down
matter what
that.
you think of him, as a politician and all that, and I know everybody's got different opinions or whatever, but the guy seemed like a genuinely funny guy. He
And
knew how to work a
nice.
crowd.
And a nice guy. He
Yeah.
was always. I've never seen him once be abusive to anybody. Um, he was the kind of guy, we know these guys that treated a waitress like she was a princess and treated a princess like she was an equal. You know,
Yep.
he was a good guy. He was a good guy. There's a lot of stuff he did that I don't like putting a tax on Social Security.
Right.
I'm getting social, so I got to pay taxes.
Yeah, yeah.
But as a guy, as a man to sit down with, to talk to, he was a nice guy.
Yeah, I could see that. So you wound up being deputy chief counsel in the President's Commission on Organized Crime. What was that job? Were you obviously you were in Washington. How long were you doing something like this?
So I investigated three major issues. This was in the early 80s to 88. One on money laundering and wound up writing a report on money laundering for the president. One on the war on drugs and how that's going. And it wasn't going well then, still not
No,
going well.
you're right. Yeah.
And one on organized crime today at that point, and how not just, as my mother would say, tell everybody it's not just the mafia, it's also Chinese triads and the Japanese yakuza, and everybody has organized crime. And so job basically was to investigate all of this. So you would travel, and I would have my badge and my ID, and I would interview these guys that were in prison, lawyers that, paid off juries, and
Mm.
um, all sorts of good stuff. Jackie Presser did the deposition of Jackie Presser, who was, I think, at the time from from Ohio, and he was the head of the Teamsters.
So
Um,
I'm trying to think of the time frame. When did Rico really kick into high gear?
oh, so Rico was kicking in right then.
Yeah, that
This
really
was
was a
all
very effective weapon against
right.
organized crime.
So Rico was brand new. In fact, when I left the Crime Commission, I was offered a job by a senator to be their RICO guy.
Okay.
But I took the job with Wisconsin. They were looking for the head of their public defender office. And it was a New York Times ad, and I answered the ad, and they wound up hiring. My wife is originally from Wisconsin, and
Oh, okay.
she would say she was a prosecutor in Washington, and we fell in love. This is my new wife. We fell
Yes.
in love, and she stuck with me. I don't know why, but she stuck with me. Um, but we were talking about, wouldn't it be nice just to live in Wisconsin instead of the hustle and back and forth in Washington? And
Right.
I said, Um, Judy, remember when you said that? Excuse me. I was offered a job. Do you still want to go to Wisconsin? And we wound up going to Wisconsin in 88.
So that was with the Wisconsin Public Defender's Office?
Yeah, it was. So what happened in Wisconsin, you probably remember this. Tommy Thompson was just elected.
Okay.
Rick Phelps was the head of the public defender's office and he resigned, took a job. Oh, he became the county exec in Dane County.
Okay.
And so he resigned as the statewide public defender. There's 41 offices and about 300 attorneys plus staff. And so they were looking for a new guy. And I answered the ad and they hired me.
Wow.
My
Now,
wife and I moved here.
was your wife an attorney as well, it sounds like?
Yeah, she was a prosecutor with Department of Justice, and she
Okay.
wound up landing a job at UW-Madison, the law school, in
Okay.
the clinical program, working
Wow.
with these law students in
What year
the
was she in the
prison.
law school?
She was there from 88 until 2011.
Oh, you know what? It, I don't know if you want to say her name or not, but I've got friends
Judy
that went to,
Olingi.
what was the last name?
Olingi,
Oh,
Olingy.
I'll have to ask. I've got a very good friend. She went through law school at that time. I'm sure she would know her.
What's her name?
Lisa Polinsky. Back then it was Lisa Peckham. I don't know if was she married? I can't remember if she was married or not back then, but it was either Peckham or Polinsky. Lisa.
If she went through the clinical program, which was what was it called? Uh, LAIP.
I have no
Um,
idea.
yeah, she
But
would know Judy.
she went into family law, but I don't think she went directly into family law. Like when we were in school, it's like, it's like, yeah, I'll be a DA and you could be the cop,
Yeah,
bring me the case, that kind of stuff. We're all
yeah,
idealistic and, having fun, way
it's
back
true.
then.
That's right.
So, you go into public defense, there is a stigma, and especially with cops, you can't like a public defender or, a defense attorney. It's adversarial in nature.
Yeah,
But I would tell my guys, it's like you might be in a spot where you might need a good defense attorney. None of us are immune to this, and it's a part of the criminal justice system. And without it, what are we? We're nothing. You have to have it.
they gave me a um, jokingly hard time,
Okay.
to poke fun and stuff. But I wasn't immediately accepted by the staff at the public defender's office
Okay.
because I was a former cop. It was just the reverse.
Yeah.
So it,
Interesting. That's a different optic that I didn't even think of. Okay.
yeah.
Tell me about
So
it.
it was that was the rough part, especially the Milwaukee office. I think one of the attorneys there said, "Well, you probably last maybe 2 years here, so don't get comfortable." Um, and I think he's gone, and I lasted 23 years as the state public defender.
Wow.
Um, I I liked it. It's interesting. I liked it for many of the same reasons. I liked being a cop. Not the camaraderie stuff, not,
Right.
I still miss that. But that, um, so this kid is arrested in Kenosha. This mother walks out of like a 7-Eleven, and she's got a kid, and the kid is 7 or 8 years old. And he takes something out of his pocket and it's a candy bar.
Yeah.
She said, "Did you take that from that store?" And he says, "Okay, go in there and tell that man you're sorry." And he went back in and he said he was sorry. Well, they held him and they called the police to
For
have
a
this kid
candy bar.
for a candy bar.
Oh my God. All right.
Um, so that's me. I want to get involved in that now. I mean,
Sure.
what you did was here's a mother trying to do the right thing.
Well, I'm going to stop you because shame on the clerk. You didn't really lose it. It's a kid. It's a 7 or 8 year old kid, and shame on the cops.
Yep.
It's
I
like
agree.
if I can't tell you how many times we were called to X, Y, or Z or something similar to that. And you look at the clerk, it's like, are you out of your mind? This kid actually
Yep,
has a mom that actually wants him to own up to it. This is a teaching moment. This is a life
that's right.
lesson.
That's
What
right. You
what are
can be
you
sure
doing?
she'll never do that again. She'll never
Yep.
trust the cops again. She'll never tell her son to go in and say,
Ugh.
I'm sorry. Um, so, yeah, I thought of it more like I was a kid growing up in the projects.
Sure.
I'm gonna see what I can do to see if I can help these kids growing up in the projects. S- See if our office could represent them in such a way. So, usually you think of the public defender's office as you go into the public defender's office and, it's free, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, just wait your turn. Um, we didn't want to do that. We changed that. You are like a paying client.
Okay.
We're going to treat you with respect. We're going to Mr. and Mrs., whatever it might be, but we're going to treat you as though you're walking into a big time law firm. And I think I really believe that the Wisconsin Public Defender's Office is the best in the world. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
and and I'm not the only one that says that. So, for example, I was asked to go to Japan to help them build a criminal justice public defender system. And if you pick up a Japanese criminal justice book now, the laws of Japan,
Yeah.
everything's written in Japanese, except you'll see based on Wisconsin State Public Defender's Office.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
we helped build the Israeli Public Defender's
Mm,
Office. So I, I that wasn't because of me. I mean, I walked into the very best state public defender's office in the world to run, and it had a great board. It still does, has a great board. The present head of that, Jennifer Bias, was a staff attorney with me, and she's amazing. She's just amazing. Um, Public defender's office, exactly what you say about cops, would they reject the public defender? Same thing. The public defenders reject you if you were a cop. And you've got to prove yourself through that. You've got to get through that mess.
well, and
Accept
I
it.
will say, it's like anything else. You know, I dealt with a lot of defense attorneys, both public defenders and the ones that were making big bucks.
Mhm.
And some were outstanding. And yeah, I'm getting grilled on the witness stand, and the whole time I have this little voice in the back of my head going, if I ever get into a jam, I want him.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like, boy, holy cow. And it's the defense attorney that's not waving his arms around, causing a big commotion, being a circus clown, etc. It's the Columbo. It's the
Yep.
one that, is just so sharp. And
Yep.
you're like, oh, yeah, okay.
If, if
And
you ever want to get a really sharp criminal defense attorney on your show, I highly recommend Steve Hurley.
okay.
He's a private attorney in Madison, but he's a gentleman. He's not going to put on a big show, but he's smart. He knows his stuff. I mean, that's who I would want. If I
Okay.
were in trouble, I'd call Steve Hurley.
Yeah,
You know?
I was testifying in a very a homicide that was very it was well covered. It was in the news like crazy, and I was the first officer on the scene. I wasn't brand new, but I was fairly new,
Hmm.
and it was quite an interesting one because you had one of the biggest drug dealers in Milwaukee, and he impregnated this gal from Oak Creek that was like 21, 22 years old. They have a fight. She goes home to Oak Creek. Well, he's got another side piece up in like Fox Point, a very affluent suburb. And she came from a lot of money, but she wanted to take a walk on the wild side in the hood, and he calls her after his pregnant girlfriend leaves, and they're in the act, and the girl from Oak Creek comes back unannounced. And, it's like, oh, here's my baby daddy, my future baby daddy, doing the horizontal mambo with this. And she was 16, she was a minor. She sneaks out of the house in the middle of the night, and the cat fight ensues. What are you doing with my man? And this drug dealer is just like, oh shit. And the fight rolls into the kitchen, and the pregnant gal takes a butcher knife out of the butcher block
Good
and
Lord.
stabs her in the neck. And this drug dealer's like, holy shit. So he picks her up. It's a upper and lower, runs downstairs with her, and he loses, not to be too graphic, but there's a lot of blood and it's slippery. Whenever you're fighting with somebody, you're trying to hold somebody that's bleeding. It isn't fun. It's not like the movies. So he tackles her and takes the knife out. Well, now it becomes a geyser. That's the last thing you should do. So he carries her to his car, goes to St. Mary's, does the drive-through drop off where he literally opens the door, kicks her out, and takes off. Well, she's already dead.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm the cop. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm working midnight to 8. And I get the call for, hey, a woman screaming in the alley. And I'm like, that's all I got. So I get there, and my sergeant backs me up because everybody else was on a shooting or whatever. And there's a fire department washing down my crime scene. I'm like, guys, stop, stop. You're destroying my crime scene here. There's so much blood. Yeah. I'm like, all right, just go home. Go eat ice cream. Go make popcorn. Do whatever you guys do. So they take off. And what happened was, we're just standing around. I'm looking for bullet casings. I'm looking for a dead body. It's in the middle of one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. There's rotting garbage all over the place, et cetera, et cetera. And the dispatcher is like, hey, squad 5, that was my boss, is go on a side channel. It's like, yeah. So I'm like, whoa, what's going on? It's like, yeah, they just had a dead body dumped off at St. Mary's. It's probably related to what you're on. It's like, okay, fair enough. So literally, he gets off the radio, and here comes this guy, the drug dealer, just walking up the alley, covered in blood, just covered. And we're like, and this sergeant had the best sense of humor of anyone I ever worked with. Jim Byer was a king of he could have made his living as a stand-up comic, but he looks at me and says, hey, there's a good FI, why don't we go jack him up? I'm like, yeah, we probably should. And he didn't run. We're like, so I hook him up. I'm like, anything you want to tell us? No. Is that your house back there? Yeah. Do you mind if we go inside? Because we both thought, well, there's a dead body in there, or another dead body, or something crazy is going on. He's like, no, not at all. The key's in my pocket right here. You can go in. All right. So we walk up the stairs. It's a upper and a lower. And he looks and is like, let's knock on the door first. I'm like, okay. We knock. There's the gal who just killed the other gal. She's got a little bit of blood on her fingers. Her fingernails are broken. You could see some defensive wounds. And she's like 8 months pregnant. She's got a big old pregnant belly. And, this is an all black neighborhood, and she's white. And we're like, oh, this is interesting. There's a lot of stuff not adding up here, but we kind of are figuring out what's going on. And she put the knife in the sink, and there's still blood on it. So, then it just unraveled. This guy had glass pitchers filled with powder cocaine all over the place. There was, he had two pit bulls locked up in a closet. And it's like, well, we have to call Maddox and get the pit bulls out. We can't just leave them because we arrested him and we arrested her, obviously. And we break the door down to get the pit bulls. There's stolen Glocks up to the ceiling, floor to ceiling, from FedEx that they stole. And I'm just like, this is turning into a freaking nightmare. To make a long story short, I'm writing reports till 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, yeah.
And this is when we hand wrote reports. And, I had to be at work at midnight. I just took a nap in my car for like a half hour. And, you know, then, okay, now here's this the victim's parents had a lot of money, and they really wanted the DA to go with like first degree intentional. And it wasn't first degree intentional. because this was not pre-planned. This is a crime of passion,
Yep.
literally. Yeah, it is, as the old saying is, it is what it is. So they were trying to get something that wasn't.
Yeah.
And it is a very roundabout way of saying it. It's like they hired this defense attorney, it was Roger Kohler. And I thought I was up on the stand. I thought Columbo was like going for me. He was
Yeah.
so good. He's like,
Oh, he's a good attorney.
one more thing. And I'm just like, oh, here we go. And, we got done. Yeah. And it was like, I was done with my thing. And, of course, it was third degree or whatever it was. It wasn't first degree intentional. And her parents, I don't know, they did whatever they did. There was all kinds of political pressure, et cetera, et cetera. It was very high profile. And I'm in the hallway. I knew I was done. And I looked at him and I said, "You did a really good job." He says, "Thanks." He said, "Ordinarily, cops don't say that to me." I said, "Well, I recognize when somebody is good at what they do." And I said, "If I'm ever in a jam, I'm calling you."
Yeah.
So, it's a
Good for
little
you.
unusual for a cop to think that way, I guess. But I,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, here we go.
And if that guy didn't come walking down the alley to you, you guys would have left and gone to the hospital
Oh,
to see the body.
absolutely. Yeah, we didn't know which house. I mean,
Oh,
eventually we would have canvassed, and if that gal opened the door, well, then that would have opened a can of worms,
sure.
and we would have figured it out eventually. But oh my God, yeah,
Oh,
it's amazing how life goes like that. But
great
hey,
story. I love that story.
yeah, so
Wow.
again, I'm looking at your bio. I had to ask you about, you were in a movie, The Anderson Tapes, with Sean
What?
Connery, one of my film heroes, the best James Bond. I did like Daniel Craig, but Sean Connery kicked ass.
Sean Connery.
Diane Cannon and Christopher Walken. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. But it sounds more impressive than it is. So, Tom Kenny and I were asked to assist Sydney, direct us.
Yep.
We didn't know him at the time, but Sidney Lumet. And so block off traffic, just filming on the street. He's going to do a car rollover in the film and stuff like that. And I look around and they've got all these extras that are dressed up like New York City cops. And I see these guys and they have their ribbon that showed that they made a great arrest or saved the life of something.
Sure.
And it's on the wrong side. It's above their name tag. And I say to Sidney Lumet, don't want to interfere with what you're doing, but you see those ribbons? They should go on the other side of his shirt. And he said, hey, thanks. We're going to change him over. Do you want to be in the movie? I said, yeah. What can I
Why
do?
not?
And he said, well, we're going to flip this van. And after we flip the van, we're going to put a guy in it and you're going to get him out. He's dead. You're going to drag him out of the. Okay. So they crash the van and I'm pulling the guy out. And for my big scene, I bang my head on the top of the van. I wind up smiling as I'm getting the guy out, and Sidney is saying, "This isn't going to get you any awards, officer. Just relax. Just take him out of the van." And I take him out of the van, and again, I smile as I do it. Well, in the movie, you wind up liking this guy that is killed in the van. And then for maybe 3 seconds, there is nothing on the screen but my face as a cop smiling as I pull him out of the van. Um, but yeah, I sat on the side. I went over to there are a couple of chairs, and I walked over and I said, "Do you mind if I sit with you?" It's Christopher Walken and basically the cast, the top guys, and
Yeah.
including James Bond, who I love. Um, and he says, well, are you real or are you an extra? And I said, I'm not an extra, I'm a cop. He said, yeah, sit down, we'll talk. And so I said, that was Sean Connery that asked me that. And I sat
Oh,
down
hell
there
yeah.
and we just chatted and taking a break and had good food and stuff like that. And
Oh,
so I
how
wind up
cool.
in the movie. I'm in the movie,
Good for
the end
you.
of
That's
the tapes.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's good. So
yeah.
your writing career, let's segue to that. How many books have you published?
If you count the three books that I wrote for the federal government. And sometimes I count them, sometimes I don't. Money laundering, organized crime, and the war on drugs. Then it would be seven nonfiction, counting those three. The others
Okay.
are law books, and two fiction, two novels, and working on my third novel now.
Sweet. Now, are you traditionally
Yeah,
published, self-published?
I got lucky. I have a traditional contract with an advance,
Okay.
and just out of luck, just
Okay.
pure luck.
Yeah, your two fiction books, what? Weepers and Nunzio's Way. This
Yeah.
is a series. Real quick, what are the books about?
So, um, Weepers is this kid Angelo, me,
Okay.
growing up in the housing project. So, what I wanted to do with that book basically is to sort of raise the curtain on what it's like to grow up in those projects. But I didn't want to write it as a sociologist. I
Okay.
wanted to tell it as a story, a fun story. Um, I have an uncle, Mario, died recently, who allegedly is part of organized crime, who I love to death.
Yeah.
And he would talk to me all the time when I was growing up and told me these stories. And so I took all of those stories and stories from the neighborhood. There used to be guys and these old women and old men that would sit on benches in the neighborhood. And they just wanted to tell their story to somebody. And I loved listening to the
Oh,
stories.
yeah.
And I'd have these people telling me the stories of the neighborhood and stuff. So I took all of that stuff and created a story with a plot, and it was fun doing. It was almost like living twice. I
Yeah.
real characters but change their names, real events but change. It's a what is it? Roman a cleef in French. Roman a cleef, I think, where you take true events, true story, true people, everything's real, and then you put this blanket of fiction over everything.
Okay.
And the fun thing is trying to guess, oh, was that so and so? Was that Mario Gigante that's in that book? Or who is Nunzio? And
So now are you working on the third book in that
I am,
series?
I
Okay,
am.
when do we expect that to come out?
Well, my publisher thinks it's coming out, that I'll be finished with it in August.
Okay.
I'm trying. Kara, if you're listening, I'm trying. I'm trying.
What's it going to be called?
A black tiger tea. Um, there is this myth out of Cambodia that if you grind the bones of a black tiger into a tea and drink it, you will become all powerful. You're invincible.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to be Superman. Um, and part of this third book is going to be it's all organized crime and gangs.
Okay.
But part of this third book is going to be the mafia or La Casa Nostra hooking up with the Chinese triads in Cambodia and in China, and for certain reasons, for vengeance.
Okay.
And so I figured Black Tiger Tea is my working title. It might change,
Sweet.
but that's the working title. How about
Well,
you?
I just released a book in January, The Good Collar, which is, if you could imagine Dexter being a police chaplain.
Oh, I love this so much. What a great idea.
Yeah, it's of course, the main character, you know, is the sergeant in the gang unit. He's got all kind life is going great. His wife just tells him that she's pregnant. They've been trying to get pregnant forever. They go out and eat kind of in a shady part of town, but his wife wanted to check this place out. And of course, they get jumped going back to their car. And, she's killed. He's in a coma. Drama, drama, drama. And the police chaplain is trying to help him out because, he's turning into an alcoholic. He's drowning his sorrows in booze,
Sure.
which is what, it's very typical.
Yeah,
And what he doesn't realize is his police chaplain is like Dexter. He rights all the wrongs. Well, he's getting old and he has cancer and he's looking for an apprentice. So this the sergeant, excuse me, is about to lose his job because he got drunk and he got stupid at a bar and the chief doesn't like him. So, in order to save his pension, he's like, you know what? He's a good Irish Catholic boy. He went to the seminary when he was in high school. and he is has a religious, background. He said, "I'm going to make you the police chaplain, but here's the caveat: you get to keep your pension. You're still a city of Milwaukee employee. The police. You're not a cop anymore, but you have to take care of. You have to right all the wrongs. I'm going to show you how to do it." And of course, he's going to use that position to go after the guys that killed his wife, that got away on a technicality in court,
Yeah.
for a poor prosecution. They didn't, do a very good job with the prosecution, blah, blah, blah. So, and of course, I've got some cool side characters, his little Irish mom, his sister is a sister. She's a nun. But of course, she's very attractive. So, you have the guys that are saying lewd things about his sister. That's the nun, and he's got a very unlikely guardian angel. I'll just say that.
Oh, is this out?
Yeah.
I'm going to pick it up.
Oh,
I
thank
love
you.
it. I love the
I
way it sounds.
Yep. So yeah, that's what I've got going on. But tell you what, for your books, if I love asking these fun questions, if for any of these books, if it makes it to the silver screen or Apple or Hulu or
That'd be a kick.
whatever, who would you want playing the lead role?
Oh
What
boy.
actor or actress?
For Nunzio, it has to be De Niro. I know he's getting old, but Mario loved De Niro.
Okay.
Um, and I'm an old guy, so when I think about Angela's mother, I think in terms of a Natalie Wood looking person.
Okay.
Um, Mario, when I was first writing it, I said to him, "I'm going to use your name in the book," and he said, "No, don't use my name. I don't want you to use my name. I'm getting in too much trouble anyway." And I said, "Well, what name do you want me to use?" And he said, "Well, Nunzio's my favorite pizza place. Why don't you name me
There we
Nunzio?"
go.
So after the book came out, I sent him the first copy, and my aunt, his wife, called me up, Phyllis, and said, "Nick, you know what your crazy uncle's doing? He's walking all around town with your book, saying, 'Hey, this is me. This is
Yeah.
me, Nunzio.'" I said,
That's funny. I love it.
"Nobody used his real name."
Oh, that's good. So,
Yeah.
if time and money weren't a consideration, what project would you like to work on?
Oh, Jesus.
Do you have a
Like
passion project of some kind?
if I could do something, I would want to work on trying to figure a way to get money out of politics. I would want to
That's a
work
tall
on,
order, mister.
I
That's
know, but you're saying money doesn't matter and time doesn't matter.
yeah.
I would want to take that on. I would want to put together some kind of a team, not a crazy ass Musk kind of team going in blindly. I want a team that's surgical. That's
Okay.
we're gonna figure what the laws ought to be so that a senator is held to the same standard as a cop. You take a free cup of coffee, you could be in trouble, senator. Um,
That that would
and
change some lives, that's for sure.
and I would want their pay to be the minimum wage. You want to make
Ooh.
more money, raise the minimum wage. So
Wow.
that would be my project.
Okay. That's I've never had somebody say that to me, so that's very interesting. I like it. So, if you had a giant billboard that millions could see,
Oh,
what would you
geez.
want on it and why? Like a favorite saying or quote, something like that.
Boy, my first reaction, but I'm going to change it, is be kind. But I think I've always believed this in my heart. Maybe it's from being a cop, that when people would ask me about being a public defender, couldn't you make more money if you were a private attorney? I think what I would want on it is that it's not about what you get for what you do. It's about what you become by doing it.
Oh,
That
I like it.
matters. And I think that's what I would put there. Um, yeah, I think that's it. I think if I had to pick something, I think that's what it would be.
Beautiful. All right. So what's next for you? You're working on the next book. What else is going
Working
on?
on the next book.
Okay.
I my son graduates from UW-Madison with a degree in English. He
Okay.
wants to be a writer
Perfect.
in May. Um, Boy, he did. Oh, I'm gonna just say this, and then you can tell me to shut up. The thing I love most about my books, my two novels,
Yeah.
is that Josh, my son, read the first one, did the audiobook,
Oh,
and my
cool.
son and my daughter together read the second one.
Oh, is
Josh
that
and Jennifer.
neat? That is
So,
awesome.
if you think about it, Patrick, anytime I want, I can hear my kids tell me
Oh.
my story.
Oh, dude,
Anytime,
that's
ever.
genius. That's
I love
genius.
it. I just love it.
Oh my
Um,
God.
so yeah, that's my favorite thing. And so as I write this, I'm thinking about, once again, Josh and Erica. Um, got to get them working on helping me with the editing, and they're going to read the final book.
Very good. I love it. All right, let's wrap this up. Where do people find you? Do you have a website, social links?
And I have a website, nickchiarkas.com. It's being rebuilt by the person that does that. Good friends with my publisher. My publisher is Kara Henschel out of Milwaukee.
Oh,
She's
okay.
great. She's wonderful. It's a medium-sized publishing house.
Mhm.
Um, or they can email me. If they have any questions or want to ask me about anything, they can email me at nick.charkas@gmail.com.
Okay. Perfect.
Um,
I'll I'll throw that in the show notes.
it's good meeting you, Sarge.
Yeah, you know what? It was great meeting you and talking about all this great stuff. And boy, you've led quite an interesting life. I will say that. You've done a lot of stuff.
You make me miss being a copy of him more.
Oh, I'm
Really.
sorry. I didn't mean to do that,
No,
but
it's a good feeling. And I get
it,
to read the third book is more about Danny becoming a cop. And I'm
okay.
going to pick up your book. I'm going to enjoy reading that.
Well, I will definitely get your books. And now I want to get the audio since your kids were doing the
Yeah.
narration. How can I not get those? Come on now.
He, it's just for me. I mean, it just tickles me to death.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to sign off. Stay tuned for the debrief afterwards. Thank you so much for being on the show, Nick. This was an unexpected pleasure. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you, Patrick. Really, thanks a lot.